e o patrimônio do centro da cidade de São Paulo. Desde março, a gente vem agendando esforços desde as várias secretarias da Prefeitura para discutir, através de projetos estratégicos, o desenvolvimento de políticas públicas nos espaços da cidade. Em abril, nós tivemos uma contribuição muito importante nesse processo, através da participação de várias universidades, entidades, associações e organizações da sociedade, em conjunto com diversas secretarias da Prefeitura, iniciando o primeiro processo de diálogo aberto sobre o centro. Tivemos um outro diálogo aberto em agosto, aí mais ampliado, com a participação de movimentos culturais, de estudantes, de mais funcionários da Prefeitura de São Paulo, de arquitetos, engenheiros, gestores, geógrafos, sociólogos. Em outubro, culminamos com o terceiro workshop do diálogo aberto, trabalhando as questões dos espaços centrais, dos projetos pilotos e de um processo de renovação estratégica da cidade através de seus espaços públicos, tendo como premissa inicial um trabalho sobre o Vale do Anhangabaú. E hoje a gente está aqui não para encerrar um processo, mas para nos demonstrar os resultados de todo esse trabalho ao longo de 2013, para encerrar de fato uma fase e para renovar e iniciar, aí, pactuado com diversos atores, uma nova fase para 2014. Durante esse processo, a gente contou com a colaboração de várias entidades e de suporte de várias experiências e expertises. E uma das expertises bastante interessantes que a gente trouxe para São Paulo, que ele é gratificante, o gratificante acompanhamento de participar disso e culminar uma série de aprendizados para as diversas secretarias do município, foi a metodologia de projeto do escritório Gehl Architects, que é um escritório da Dinamarca, que tem um trabalho de excelência sobre espaços públicos e de pesquisa sobre a vida pública e sobre os espaços públicos. Nós trouxemos essa experiência para São Paulo, nós instruímos aí diversos agentes das secretarias da Prefeitura, aprendemos essa metodologia, conseguimos replicar ela em vários projetos que a gente está fazendo, desde o centro até as periferias da cidade, seja a leste, a norte ou a sul. Começamos um diálogo também com a Secretaria de Direitos Humanos sobre a questão dos espaços públicos dos direitos humanos, que na semana passada tivemos um grande evento discutindo isso, e a gente fecha hoje com a apresentação desses resultados. Para iniciar então essa manhã de discussão e de debate, eu gostaria então de convidar à mesa o secretário Fernando Melo Franco, o secretário Municipal de Desenvolvimento Urbano, o arquiteto David Sim, do Gehl Architects, a senhora Larissa Beltramin, secretária adjunta da Secretaria Municipal de Direitos Humanos, o senhor Maurício Dantas, que é o subprefeito da Sé, e gostaria também de convidar o senhor Cícero Araújo, que é diretor de Relações Institucionais do Banco Itaú, que é um parceiro da Prefeitura em diversas ações, e se demonstrou também bastante gratificante da parte do Itaú de trabalhar conosco nesse processo. Também Cícero Araújo, bem-vindo. E a nossa ideia hoje, então, é apresentar um pouco os resultados. Nós vamos fazer uma dinâmica proposta da seguinte maneira. O secretário vai fazer uma breve palavra sobre o que é a questão do projeto urbano e do desafio de projetar e desenvolver os espaços públicos da área central. Depois eu vou convidar o arquiteto David para fazer uma apresentação sobre a metodologia que eles trouxeram para a gente e, através dessa metodologia, mostrar o resultado dos diversas propostas e trabalhos que nós fizemos coletivamente com as diversas secretarias, universidades, estudantes, organizações não governamentais, associações do centro. E depois a gente vai promover um debate, deixar a palavra aberta para que várias de vocês possam fazer o uso dela, para que a gente possa comentar esse processo e depois eu volto para explicar um pouco dos próximos passos que a gente está sugerindo para essa proposta. Se pudermos combinar assim, gostaria então de passar a palavra para o Fernando, para que faça as considerações iniciais.
Bom dia para todos vocês, é uma enorme satisfação a gente estar aqui hoje tornando público um processo coletivo de trabalho de requalificação do centro que é iniciado a partir desse projeto coordenado pela SMU e pela São Paulo Urbanísticas. Como todos sabem, o programa de metas da gestão Haddad tem as suas massas articuladas a partir de alguns eixos chamados eixos de articulação territorial. Um desses eixos de articulação territorial é justamente o eixo de requalificação da área central de São Paulo. E por que a requalificação da área central de São Paulo ganha destaque sendo um dos 5 eixos de articulação do programa de metas? Justamente porque o centro, a área central, tem uma importância simbólica e factual da maior magnitude, não apenas dos cidadãos do município de São Paulo, mas para toda a metrópole de São Paulo. O centro é o espaço de representação de todos nós e sempre o foi. E nós queremos não apenas reforçar essa importância, quanto também repensarmos as formas pela qual o centro exercerá esse espaço de representação da população de São Paulo. O centro, como todo mundo sabe, ele se singulariza por um monte de dados superlativos, né? Quer dizer, é o lugar, talvez, de maior oferta de empregos da cidade. Ao mesmo tempo, ele é o espaço de presença de grande parte dos órgãos públicos, das 3 esferas de governo, da prefeitura. Praticamente todos os órgãos das secretarias, a própria prefeitura se encontra aqui no centro. Ele tem, de fato, ele se diferencia pela oferta de uma gama muito ampla de equipamentos públicos, em especial os equipamentos culturais, e, sobretudo, por ser talvez um dos espaços da cidade com a maior oferta de espaços públicos, a maior concentração de espaços públicos que a gente tem conhecimento. E exatamente esses espaços públicos que são o local privilegiado para que as trocas e encontros dos cidadãos ocorram. Porém, a gente fica pensando se a visão de espaço público é apenas essa visão idílica do espaço das trocas e dos encontros. Nos parece que o espaço público, sem dúvida nenhuma, ele tem esse papel muito importante, mas esse papel vai para além desse espaço de encontro. Os espaços públicos, como de uma forma geral, e em especial os espaços públicos do centro, são definitivamente espaços onde os conflitos se demonstram talvez em maior potência, exatamente porque são esses espaços de representação de toda a cidade e de toda a metrópole. E esses conflitos acontecem nas mais diversas escalas, nas mais diversas intensidades. Pode ser uma ocupação do espaço público por moradores sem teto, pode ser o conflito das formas de compartilhamento das ruas, mais exclusividade para ônibus, ou para carro, ou para táxi, ou para bicicleta, ou para o skatista, se dá através também dos conflitos entre as atividades formais de comércio, as atividades informais de comércio, se dá, na verdade, de uma forma muito complexa e que, de certa forma, nos colocam 2 questões muito importantes. Tudo isso significa que o uso do espaço público e a importância do espaço público no local que se singulariza não só pelos superlativos positivos da maior oferta de empregos, mas também pelos índices de vulnerabilidade que se diferenciam negativamente na cidade. Tudo isso significa o comprometimento do uso do espaço público, significa a perda de importância e de possibilidade do espaço público? Dificilmente, porque a gente está vivenciando hoje em São Paulo exatamente talvez o oposto. Acho que os movimentos de junho, os movimentos políticos de junho, trouxeram à tona uma questão da maior importância, que é exatamente a questão de que se retornou o espaço público, o espaço da rua, como um espaço político por essência. Isso é muito positivo. Independente dos conteúdos das manifestações, a apropriação, a ressignificação desse espaço público como espaço de domínio público, onde a política, no seu sentido amplo e positivo, se instaura, é da maior importância. E isso também vem sendo cada vez mais fortalecido a partir, por exemplo, de todo o movimento dos chamados coletivos, que vem cada vez mais mostrando uma enorme força, uma enorme dinâmica de ressignificação dos espaços da cidade. Não apenas os espaços públicos literais, como praças, mas inclusive a ressignificação de espaços que são tudo menos espaços públicos, como por exemplo o Minhocão, que é um viaduto concebido, assumido por todos nós como uma das grandes tragédias urbanas da cidade, concebido na sua função estrita da locomoção viária de automóveis e que, entretanto, vem sendo um espaço de profundas e contínuas ressignificações por parte da população que o transformam numa materialidade inerte de um viaduto num espaço de grande potência, justamente para que esses encontros negociados, pactuados, inúmeras formas de uso da cidade possam acontecer. De forma que nós acreditamos que parte do processo de requalificação do centro passa por a gente estabelecer um processo de pactuação, de repactuação, de ressignificação da forma com a qual os cidadãos da cidade vão usar esse espaço público. Evidentemente que é importante a gente discutir se o piso dos calçadões será de mosaico português ou de granito ou de concreto, mas para além da discussão da qualidade do suporte material que conforma os nossos espaços públicos, a essência do debate está justamente em um ponto potente, importante, de reunião de diversos atores, de diversos agentes, a partir do qual, justamente, negociar, ensaiar, elaborar, conceber formas possíveis desse compartilhamento do espaço da cidade. Nesse sentido que nós empreendemos esse processo, que é um processo que já se iniciou, como o Gustavo colocou, através de processos coletivos de debate, de discussão, com diversos atores aqui do centro. Dificilmente tenhamos conseguido reunir todos os atores, mas conseguimos reunir de forma voluntária diversos os atores de grande importância, para que a gente, junto, definisse rumos e estratégias de facilitação desses processos de ressignificação do centro. O que é interessante, e contamos com isso, com um trabalho muito valioso do escritório Gehl Architects da Dinamarquês, contamos exatamente com a possibilidade de que esse processo de pactuação não se restrinja meramente à mesa de projeto, à mesa de desenho, mas que a gente possa vir a implantar projetos piloto, que possamos testar juntos a potência ou não das estratégias por todos nós definidas. E a partir desse teste, desse ensaio em escala 1 para 1, que no âmbito do urbanismo e da arquitetura é uma coisa bastante ousada, de certa forma, a partir desse ensaio é que nós justamente vamos poder identificar com maior clareza os conflitos para o bem e para o mal, os desejos, as formas possíveis de coexistência no espaço da cidade. Essa é a essência desse projeto. Esse projeto ele não resume e recebe todas as políticas públicas no âmbito do governo, ele é apenas uma das estratégias possíveis e, evidentemente, enquanto uma estratégia possível de elaboração de uma ampla política pública para o centro, é que não apenas envolvermos, e estamos envolvendo, os atores da sociedade, como também os atores do setor público. Diversas secretarias têm compartilhado conosco desse processo. Essa articulação e esse diálogo intersecretarial, intersetorial é da mais profunda importância, uma vez que nós sabemos que não é uma política apenas seja da assistência social, seja econômica, seja desenvolvimento urbano, seja da segurança, que dará conta de fato, reconstruir esse domínio público desejado no centro da cidade. De forma que eu quero aqui, em primeiro lugar, agradecer ao Itaú, que teve mais do que a gentileza, eu acho que a sensibilidade de perceber o quão importante é a gente poder estar pensando e repensando a construção do centro da cidade, e o Itaú nos presenteou com o projeto aqui, que será apresentado pelo Gehl Architects. Queria agradecer também o trabalho muito importante da SMDU, mas particularmente da São Paulo Urbanismo, de toda a equipe que vem fazendo um trabalho muito sério, não apenas de desenvolvimento de projetos, mas também vem atuando como um facilitador desses processos de pactuação dos rumos da cidade, e agradecer a todas as secretarias que têm conosco participado desse processo, e em particular aqui a subprefeitura da Sé, conduzida pelo Maurício, e também a Secretaria de Direitos Humanos, aqui representada pela secretária adjunta Larissa. E, por fim, agradecer também a presença do David, que agora vai apresentar para nós um resultado final de uma primeira etapa de trabalho que nós imaginamos que seja uma etapa que se continuará por todo o tempo, até porque esses processos de uso e de reuso, de ressignificação do centro é um processo que não se encerra jamais, é um processo contínuo, como todo o processo da vida na cidade. Obrigado.
Obrigado, Fernando. Antes de passar a palavra para o David, eu gostaria de convidar a mesa para tomar assento para poder ver a apresentação do projeto. E o resultado que vai ser mostrado aqui agora é um processo de discussão, de desenvolvimento e de desenho que uma série de agentes, mais de 60 pessoas, fizeram ao longo desses meses, da qual o David teve o cuidado de resumir aqui, né, e contar um pouco para a gente do processo e dos resultados dessa etapa, para que posteriormente a gente possa desenvolver aí os demais projetos e as melhorias dos espaços públicos da área central. David, por favor, obrigado.
Obrigado. I'm sorry that after this time my Portuguese is not better. It's really a big challenge now, because, especially for the interpreter, because it takes twice as long to say things in Portuguese, and I'm actually Scottish, and we talk very fast, and I have maybe 200 slides. We can switch this one off, so it doesn't interfere. I think these. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about this process we've been through. Some of you may have seen the newspaper yesterday, and that was very nice because there was a very nice picture of a project. But, you know, sometimes everything in the newspaper isn't exactly right. And so I want to tell you a little bit more details. There's something about a Danish project. And I would like to talk today about a Brazilian project. Gehl Architects. Whoever's Gehl Architects, if we can get the lights again, sorry. Who are these Gehl Architects? We're a very small office in Copenhagen that we're so small that we can fit almost in one parking space. And we have a culture of working which we're very interested in public life, what's going on in public spaces, what people are doing, and the way traffic engineers count cars, we count people, and we're very interested in the quality of public life in places. And so I'd like to see, why is this important? Why is this public space thing that's important? And I think Fernando already touched on the fact that it was in the public spaces some of the most important questions of society are raised, and so some of the most important conflicts can be resolved. In Malmö in Sweden, one of the most criminal cities with some of the most challenging social and cultural problems, they're solving their problems in public space by making dignified public spaces where people can come together, spend time together, and find out that actually we're not so different. Of course, there's another cultural change that we're maybe beginning to think that the cars should not be the number one in the public space, but it should be the people. And we need to reprioritize how we use our public space and include many different people and accept that it's many different people who use our public space. And in Copenhagen, and I've heard a lot of talk about these European projects, like this all European. And in Europe, they've taken away the cars and they've made this very nice public space. And that's very pretty. But it's also socially very interesting because in the same public space, you've got some rich people under the umbrellas in some expensive restaurants, eating their meal and drinking their wine. But in the same space, on the edge of the water, you have local people who bought a bottle of beer in the shop, and they're listening to the same music, and they're watching the same sun going down. So about can we make public spaces where different people can cohabit together? And that's the story of New York, where we've been working for the last 7 years, improving public space. This is the famous Times Square before the changes, and taking this space and doing a European project and doing this. But of course, you don't have to have traveled in Europe or have a college education to know how to sit on a chair or to enjoy being in a public space, sharing with other people. It's not a European case, it's a human phenomenon. And so we want to support that. And in this picture here, you can see right in the middle, there's a homeless person. So it's not a project of a hygienic, a sanitizing project. Life goes on with all its diversities, all of its conflicts, but if we make civilized public space, we can use that together. And that's a story we've taken everywhere. Even after the earthquake in Christchurch, in New Zealand, the number one thing that people talked about as they wanted to rebuild their city was the public spaces, places where they could be citizens together. And it's all about a better everyday life. Because of course we can make a project for the opera and for the cultural centre, and these are very important symbolic things as a society. But I walk to work every day. I cross the street every day. My kids go to school every day. So we need to make some investment for the everyday things, to make everyday life a bit better, and for everyone. Just ordinary people seeing things. And this is, I think, the challenge for São Paulo, which is a world city, one of the economic hubs on the planet. But maybe this question of urban quality has fallen from the agenda. So we need to bring back this question of urban quality and livability. There's a fantastic history. In Anhangabaú with buildings and architecture. And I was very honoured because when I was here in the spring, I met the original architects of Anhangabaú, Rosa and Georgia, and it was fantastic to meet them. Such a brilliant project. Rather than putting a building, they created a public space which connected the two sides which are separated by the highway. And of course, in São Paulo, in Brazil, you have a fantastic culture of architecture, of design, and I wouldn't question any of that. And I'm very excited to be working here together with such talented people. But unfortunately, the great design and public spaces have fallen off the agenda, and there are perhaps many places in the downtown where we see the quality is deteriorating. So we need to get these things back on the agenda. And I guess our job in Gehl Architects, our job is not to make a project here in Copenhagen. Our job was to work as facilitators, like the coach, to help the team here in São Paulo to make a great project. And our job is to take the team on a journey, finding ways to get everybody to talk together, to work together, finding tools which allow the different people with different backgrounds to have a conversation at eye level. Because we have different experiences, we have different expertise, we have different knowledge. And how can we bring all of that knowledge on at eye level together. And we bring that process, and very often, I don't know if you can see this diagram, it's what cities are like. Very often, the people that work with the green stuff, the parks, they only do that. Or we have the people that work with the streets, the engineers, they only work with the roads. Or the architects only do buildings. But we need to find a way to bring everyone together, where all of the opinions are important, because for the citizen, it doesn't matter who is responsible for this piece or that piece. We need a continual one interface which works for everybody as they move in the city, a holistic approach. And how do we start doing that? Well, you see here we have it's like a round table, more like a square table, but you can see there are people in uniforms. I think it was the first time anybody from security was asked their opinion about public space. And the idea was to bring all these different people together and find out how to make a better downtown. And we had to talk a lot, and we had to listen a lot, and we had to have many different round tables. And this is the Danish method, because if anything, the Danish is this methodology. But gathering these with our methods for participation, for collaboration, in many different forms. But I would say this project is made in Brazil. It's made here by the team here. Now you cannot read this. These are the people participating in the workshops. And you can see it's a lot of names. And even if you move a little bit closely, you can maybe make out there's a lot of women, a lot of men. There are many different departments. And it's very important that we try to be as inclusive as possible to have as many people participating to make it work. Constantly talking, putting a post-it, taking it away, putting it back, all the time trying to get the best possible result. And I have to say I'm very grateful because of the very enthusiastic participation, both with having visionary ideas to make fantastic new things, but also to talk about the very practical, everyday things. And we have to also balance our big vision of a fantastic city, but also think about all the practical aspects from your maintenance and cleaning and security. So you can see we spend a lot, I'm showing a lot of this because I want to show a lot of evidence of all of the participation. And what's important too, the work was not done in the studio. It wasn't just, in the top of a building, oh, we make this project. We spent a lot of time out in the street, spending time looking, walking, making evaluation, looking at the urban quality, evaluating the space and seeing how well it was performing, and then comparing the results, because maybe my opinion is not the same as your opinion. So we have to get this general opinion to understand what's going on. And that allowed us to start working on a public space, public life survey. And this was working in much more detail with a team of local people going out, collecting both qualitative and quantitative data. So going, looking, counting, speaking to people, listening, finding out what's going on. So we can gather a lot of information to understand how do people walk, how many people are in Anhangabaú, what are they doing? One of the things we found out, because we'd experienced from other places, that if we look at the number of activities happening in Anhangabaú, if we compare them with somewhere in Australia or in Europe, there's very little happening. And that's quite interesting. So we have a big place, but not so much going on. So we think, well, maybe there's room for improvement there. We can see a lot of people moving, but we can see the way they move is sometimes not so convenient. And so we have to find easier ways for walking. And also we find that most of the common activity is just standing around. Of course, thing barriers, which makes it difficult to get there. There's the topography. And of course, the wayfinding, the orientation also is hard. So even if you can see down, you cannot work out how to get there. So we have to work on that. And make the connections better. And I say generally from the survey we know that Anhangabaú performs very well. It's great for events. But maybe on the everyday, it's not performing so well. and we wanted to make a balance of a place which worked very well for events and for the everyday. And so the group, and this was very important, working with this big group of people, with our workshops and our open dialogue, we wanted to build up a common understanding of the place. And then with that, we could make a common goal. So nobody feels like, oh, it's a stupid word. We try to make a way to include everybody, to make this common goal. And we created this list of common values to make an inclusive and safe place, well-connected, safe for pedestrians, and diverse program activities, strong identity design, and anchored in its local history. And then after that, we worked in the group again, and the group developed a consensus plan. And these were the things that from the very start we could all agree on, recognizing the importance, and one of the biggest things was the connection on the Gehl Street, that it should be very easy to walk straight. So take away the hole and make a very strong, direct route. Everybody agreed there should be better connections on the side streets to make access better, even through the gallery underneath. The idea of a big event space, using underneath the bridge as a stage. Recognizing the importance of a zone on the edge of the buildings here where all the tall banks are, that there should be better facades, more activities, space for different activities, for play. So we built up, better connection with the theatre and park should also connect better. And this was a common consensus of how to start making the project. And I guess everybody had this idea of Anhangabaú as being the heart of São Paulo, which is also a big challenge, because there are local people, the people who work and live immediately there, and then there are people in the surroundings, and then of course everybody in São Paulo has an opinion about Anhangabaú and a feeling about Anhangabaú. So we have to think about this inclusivity for everybody, for everybody's heart. And I guess maybe the one product which is more Gehl is this idea of thinking a lot about activities, because we understood that we had to bring more activities every day and events into Anhangabaú, things that would attract families and children, because at the moment they're very unrepresented in that space, and maybe you feel it's not a place you want to bring your children. We have to think about inviting all user groups at all stages of life with things that will attract them. We have to think about this very strong local culture and the changing seasons. We have to think a lot about cultural events, different kinds of events, exhibitions and fairs, and this balance between the day-to-day thing and the things that would happen on the weekend. And all of those things go together. Also, we have to imagine that sometimes on the normal day there's not so many people. So how do we make it feel busy and attractive when the time there's not so many people? And how do we do when there are big events? And we have to be able to contain sometimes very big events. As you know, we sometimes have huge events in Anhangabaú. How do we make those work? And so we made what we call a public space plan, a program for activities. So this is, we made one for the whole valley. And what's important here, we're looking at the mobility, how you move. And it's very important that the movement works very well through the strong Gehl connection straight across. But understanding the desire lines, because a lot of the movement in Anhangabaú is moving to and from public transportation. So we make those routes work better. We look at the stage, the connections to the park. We look at the edges, all of the edges of the space, and how to make them perform better. How to introduce new activities. We can go into more detail here on the end of the Cha Bridge, on the theatre, connected to the theatre, in the former Vale school, about being in the restaurant, playing activities. So, and this is something that there's not time to go through everything now, but I would ask you to examine the public space plan and look at the ideas we've introduced, multi-activities, and a little bit more events events and the big things at the theatre end, the stage, multiple activities in the middle, more staying, sitting, cafes, restaurants, and then at the far end, the idea of bringing in things like market, maybe antique market, art fair, food market, maybe during the week when there are workers, there could be a lunchtime farmers market to bring food to the workers. So making a space which can provide new activities. And we took inspiration from Bryant Park in New York, which is a park which is the same size as Anhangabaú, and they have been very successful because in Bryant Park they have made a lot of activities which invites people to come. And so another big city, by having the Wi-Fi, having activities going on that invites people to come, it's made a place that everybody wants to use. And they, like us, use this kind of constant appraisal, looking at what's going on to make it always better. Small kiosks with different activities, so all of the everyday life working well, and also a place where funny things can happen, exceptional events can happen. So all of this was giving us a basis for making some concepts for the plan. Now, the idea is when this project gets developed, it will be a local Brazilian architect who will make the project. It won't be a project from Copenhagen, but we had to develop some design concepts. And if I say words, or if I only put a diagram, it's very hard to imagine what do they mean. So we've made some images, so you get some ideas and you have something to react on. So we show images of, yes, I like that, or I don't know if I like that. So there are some images so you can react on. Now, the one theme that everybody talked about in the project, and I should tell you, I've been coming to São Paulo for 7 years. 7 years ago, I had my first conversation in Anhangabaú, and everybody talked about water. It was so nice with water because the memory of the river is very strong. And we all know that water is one of the most wonderful, sensual experiences you can have. It's great water. You know, it's so nice. You know, it's a hot climate, but it's fantastic. And there was this idea that maybe we could find the river again, because we know there's a river there somewhere. And if we could remember the river with water. And I know it's hard to see this diagram, but where the viaducts become bridges, where the Anhangabaú Park was, if we had water. And maybe in 15, 20, 30 years, maybe there could be like a river going through the whole downtown. Maybe we could extend the lid that goes on Anhangabaú, and maybe that could go through the whole downtown like a linear park. So the water was a fascinating idea. But we knew water doesn't work. It doesn't work in Brazil. That's what I was told. We know that there's already water there, it doesn't work. So we talked a lot about the water, and we did a lot of research, and we discovered that a lot of cities in the world have had problems. They have had problems with this kind of fountain, because it's very hard to maintain. It's very hard to keep clean. There are sometimes social problems because people bathe themselves in the water. Cities all over the world have stopped doing this. So we discovered there are some new technologies. There are new ways of doing water. This is in Paris, in Place Publique, and they have 5 millimeters of water. 5 millimeters. But you know, 5 millimeters, it's still wet. It's still very sensual. The children get very excited when they can touch this wet surface. But you know, there's no edge. There's no basin. It's very easy to clean, in fact. It's actually almost like the floor that cleans itself. So just having a wet floor and you can be bare feet in the water. And then there are ways to make the fountains that you can put them underneath the floor. So there's nothing that can be vandalized, nothing which can become broken. And with the water you can make many different effects. So sometimes you could have big water, sometimes a bit less. And then if you switch the water off, and you know, when there's a puddle after the rain, just 1-2 millimeters of water, you get the reflection. You get the reflection of the sky, you get the reflection of buildings. So very simple things. And you can do other effects. And so, in a very simple way, with these new technologies, you could have a water feeling on Anhangabaú, which could be a lot of fun. It would be an attractor. It would be a reason to bring children. And maybe on very special days, you could do something very, very big. This one is in Switzerland, and of course, you're seeing again. This is a European thing. This is a European project. And of course it's good for microclimate and comfort. And at night time it's fantastic because the water reflecting with the street lights makes very nice effects. And if you put water inside the fountains, you can get even more spectacular effects. So there's even a lot of possibilities with water. But what about European projects? We discovered that in Colombia, in Medellin, they were already doing these projects. And they were doing the barefoot park. The same thing, exactly the same technology, the same method, for the same reason. How to get the feeling, the big feeling of water, not using so much water. How to get the sensual feeling, making it easy to clean, easy to maintain. So I think and the other thing about the water, it's a way of controlling the space. Because if you have the wet surface, if you have a big surface, people stand maybe a bit everywhere. And if there's something in the middle, people stand at the side, and the people standing at the side is more cozy. It feels more busy. So on the normal day, on the normal everyday, people are at the side and it feels more busy. But then when we have events, you can switch off the water. You can switch off the water and then have space for things to happen. So if you imagine on a normal day, there could be a big wet surface, the full length of Anhangabaú, but when there was an event, you could switch off the water and have an event in the middle between the water. And this would give, so when there was maybe a small concert at the Catholic school, or maybe the market, you switch off that part of the water. Or maybe when there was a big event underneath the Cha Bridge, you would switch off that part. And of course, this can be very flexible because you can switch the water on and off and have many different kinds of events. And I think this could be very interesting because we know that in Anhangabaú, these different things are happening all the time. And actually, you would have an inbuilt floor cleaner because you clean up after the event. And maybe it could be something like this. Maybe we could imagine that next to the post office, there could be maybe a new building, a public function, very busy. And we could imagine this surface with this wet floor, just 3 millimeters of water, but this noise of water, children playing, and working with the surface. Now, one of the very basic things we talked about was this idea of water. The next subject was surface, one surface. And as you know today, there are these big holes. There are changes in level, and it's a problem for walking because you have to go around the hole, and there's a lot of damage because there's sometimes vehicles that drive in Anhangabaú and the corners get broken. Because every time you have a corner, it's like the furniture at home. If something sticks out, it can get broken. So if we had one simple surface right across, this would make the place very flexible and very easy to maintain. And so one surface would mean that it would be very easy to walk in a straight line. To walk straight, it would be very good for people with walking difficulties, people with a stroller, people in wheelchairs. So with one surface, we could have universal access. And also, just like with the water concept, if there's one simple surface, it's very easy to clean. It's very easy to maintain. And we have to consider that Anhangabaú was a slope. So we have to actually maybe 4 meters from one end to the other. So we have to design into this surface this possibility to take up the change smoothly, working with a material which would maybe accentuate, so maybe some darker stone, which is the ones that get wet, so you get this reflection. And I think there are very good Brazilian landscape architects who can choose the materials, the right materials to perform well, produce locally. Next subject, very important, sitting down, because what we learned today, there was not enough sitting opportunities. So we wanted to talk a lot about how to sit in public place. And we imagined a whole family of benches. Because sometimes you're on your own, sometimes you want to watch something, sometimes you want to be with a group of friends and you want to talk. So we need to have not one solution, but many sitting solutions. And so we find a whole family of different things for under the viaduct, on the edge of the water. And we could imagine this family of benches which do different things. Ideally, the shapes would encourage people to sit down, to feel comfortable, to gather in groups, could be nice. And then we would combine that with mobile furniture, because we don't know exactly how everybody wants to be. We can make some good guesses, we can estimate where there'll be needs. But if we also have some movable furniture, then people can choose exactly where they want to sit. So we have a combination of fixed benches and movable furniture. And then more green, of course. I think everybody agreed in all of the workshops about more green. But you know, green, it can be very hard to maintain. So we have to think, how can we get the feeling of more green? And the trees. I have never met anyone in São Paulo, I've never met anyone who didn't like trees. I'm going to find out how could we get more trees. So the quality of this canopy of the trees, because you get protection from the sun. It's a very nice feeling with the leaves moving and the noise. And then the other good thing is with the trees, because the canopy is high up, you see between. And so you're not frightened for security, you're not frightened because you can see through. And so you have the feeling of green, but it's still very open. And that openness is important for events as well. So building on the attractive green, we want to maintain, there's 92 existing trees. And the idea was to add at least 170 new trees. So we build on top of what's already there, we take what's already there and plant more trees. And again, the Brazilian landscape architects have chosen the appropriate local trees, which perform very well, give good shade. And we build up this canopy, this marquisa, I've learned it's called in Portuguese. And this is perfect in a public space because you've got the feeling of a light roof. You've got nice lots of view, and if there's a big event, you can still see the stage because the leaves are high up. At night time, nobody can hide. The stems of the tree are very thin, so you can feel very secure. So this is a way to bring a lot of green feeling, but without problems. Drive park again. And we also thought it would be very nice, the theatre park, if we could use that more, and have some possibilities to make the lawn in front of the theatre park more welcoming, so you could lie on the grass in front of the theatre. Light. Now I'm sure you're beginning to get tired now, but I'll go a bit faster. Light. Very important, one of the big subjects that, and the idea was, I'm sorry, these images are very small, but the idea was just to make a flexible lighting system. Because sometimes when there's a big event, you want a lot of light, and you want this kind of, I don't know, wow, kind of feeling. And then maybe sometimes you want more discrete light. And we have to make a space which can give you the wow and the, and so we need to make it flexible to be both those things. Maybe more important, or as important as the surface and the things in the square, is how the buildings around the square perform. And we're very interested in the ground floor of the buildings. And sometimes The ground floor is a little bit disappointing. It doesn't give you so much when you walk around. Many of the functions, the activities on the ground floor are not so active. They're not so inviting. It's parking or some office or a bank. And physically there are a lot of doors. There are doors and windows, but almost always they're blank. So you cannot see in, you cannot come inside. So we were very interested in a program to make the facades softer, so it wasn't so hard. And maybe we could start with some, I know it's extra small, very, very small. Maybe putting a bench, just a bench on the wall to make the facade a bit more soft. Or maybe not taking away the parking, but making a very small shop or a very small kiosk, which would be on the edge of the building. So as you walked in Anhangabaú, there was a nice activity on the edge, even if it's only 1 meter deep. Of course, it would be very nice if there could be some small shops, and maybe with 3 or 4 meters, you could create some small shops on the edge of Anhangabaú. And of course, maybe we could introduce the culture of more activities on the ground floor. And if that was successful, we could also go upstairs. And maybe on the first 2 floors, have activities like cafe, like shops, like galleries, activities which relate to the public space. We've had a lot of good ideas, maybe to have a gym, like a fitness place, things that would be useful for people to work and work around Anhangabaú. And working with the upstairs, and this would bring a lot of life to the street. And maybe even in the condition where we have these big bank buildings, maybe there could be a connection right through the buildings and take up the change in level, so we could connect Anhangabaú better to the surrounding streets. There is this wonderful place, the underground, just out here, and I mean, the first time I saw it, I thought, wow, this is like Saks Fifth Avenue. It was, and I don't know, I mean, we were discussing, there's ideas, maybe there could be cultural activities, maybe there could be some commercial activities mixed with cultural activities, maybe there could be a pop-up department store with something else which would bring life into connecting with Anhangabaú. And of course, there are also some existing facades which could get a little facelift, a lifting, a little bit of makeup, and we could make those small businesses on the corner of Anhangabaú perform better. And then we cannot force anybody to do anything. So we can make some nice suggestions with the people who have buildings in Anhangabaú. Maybe you can make some changes. But if we want to ensure a lively edge, we have to maybe introduce some other things. So how could we do that? Well, one way is on these edges, on the edges of the space. We thought we could have some, what you call bancas, we see kiosks, small shops, small places, not only for newspapers, but with many functions. The groups and the workshops liked a lot the story of the kiosk in Melbourne, because on the main square in Melbourne in Australia, they put a flower kiosk which was open 24 hours. And they put that instead of a police car, because they found that the presence of a kiosk selling flowers at night was just as effective as having a police car. And so that was when we thought about that there would be not just all the peaceful kiosks, there should be a curated program putting many different things into these bancas. Putting coffee and drink, for books, for flowers, for ice cream, takeaway, also some public toilet. So the kiosks could have some useful functions which would complement each other. This is a kiosk or a banca in Paris, which has games and toys. And the city operates this, and if you give your ID, you can borrow some games or some toys, and so children can come to the place and exchange an idea and they can play with something. And of course, throughout the square, we have to improve access. And all of those steps and streets that lead to Anhangabaú, we have to make them better too. It's not enough just to do the space, we have to look at those connections. And how could we make the steps live more? You know, and the edges which lead down to Anhangabaú, it's like a theatre. And you could actually make the space function like a theatre, like having spaces to sit. And you can do it in a very simple way with wooden seats, so that all of the stairs that lead down can become like amphitheatres, so you can watch the space. There are some challenges in integrating public transportation. The San Bento station, for example, it's very hard to see inside, and when it's nighttime, it looks a little bit scary. And so can we, in a very simple way, rather than having this mysterious hole, could we have a more simple way of moving on the surface, so that the subway station is better connected with the space in a more public way, which is more comfortable? And also, you know that some of you maybe take the bus underneath Anhangabaú. Has anybody been in the black hole? I think one of the most scary, terrible experiences is to go down in the black hole under Anhangabaú. But if we could make this much nicer, we could make very nice connections down to the tunnel with better lighting, a better connection to make the public transport connection to Anhangabaú function much better. And underneath the viaduct, we could work with lighting and effects to make something much, because you know, sometimes underneath this bridge, it's quite, you look up and it's black or it's grey. Maybe we could do some projection or something with lighting. So, if we put all of these things together, we can maybe imagine a public space with this nice surface, this floor which is sometimes wet, with some furniture which you can move around, a very big canopy of trees, and a place where it's possible to do many activities. And all of these things that we put together here was developed by the team here in São Paulo, with many participants who added all these things to make this composition. You could even imagine at night what it could be like. A very attractive place, and I think that would be our biggest success. If we could make Anhangabaú attractive at night time. So activities going on, you know, the lights under the bridge, and with all of these trees, you could put lighting underneath onto the trees to make a very nice lighting effect. But how do we get there? How do we start thinking about these projects? Well, we have this idea of pilot projects. Am I okay for time? Okay, I talk. You must be so tired. Pilot projects, and this is like a way of how can we make this dream come true? How can we make sure that we make the right decisions? And at Gehl Architects, like in the New York project, we do this pilot. We do a test, because I'm not so arrogant to believe that I know all the answers. I have some ideas, my other professional colleagues have ideas, but we should test what we do before we make it permanent. So what happened in New York, we worked with paint. And in a very simple way, they used paint. This is in Argentina, in Mar del Plata, the same concept. Putting out paint, and in one night, you can create the interventions you want to make. If you want to make it better to cross the road, safer to cross the road, more space for people, more place to sit. We can test all of those things we want to test in pilot projects. So, this idea of creating a system for testing. So we will test our ideas, all of the different themes, but put it out there, make it scale 1 to 1, and then we can find out if we think it works, and then we can look at implementation, and then finally making a project. But it's an iterative process. It's a way of testing and retesting, and that's the way to start the project. We have a very, very simple, cheap toolkit. Some temporary furniture, some umbrellas, some very simple signs, some plants and pots and simple. toolkit which allows us to test these ideas. And the idea is that here in São Paulo, we would make some tests. Now, of course, we want to make every street and every public space in São Paulo wonderful. But we have to start somewhere. And so we start with some small thematic pilot projects, just testing different things that we think we need to work with. So there's an idea about working with mobility, questions about walking and cycling and public transport around São Paulo. So that got one theme because we couldn't do everything everywhere. We looked at the shopping environment in Marshall with making the walking experience better, but also introduce more stopping and staying activities. We looked at the combination of cultural life and everyday life, also children around the Patio do Colegio, and finally we looked at youth culture and nighttime activities, especially around the Lago San Francisco. So I'll very quickly take you to these 4 places and some of the themes. Every city has big challenges with mobility, and how do you make it work better? And so we looked at 2 kind of areas for working. One was we wanted to get the walking experience and the public transport experience better, and that's on São Paulo. And then we also looked at, because of the connection towards the railway station, having a test for some really good cycling infrastructure. Could we test a kind of best practice cycling situation? And also looking like a necklace. If you imagine like a necklace, a string of pearls, having a necklace of small public spaces, which would make walking and also waiting for the bus more enjoyable and more pleasant. So, starting around the square and the church, improving the waiting facilities, and improving the facilities for the bus. Because actually we discovered that a lot of the behavior to do with people taking the bus is based on where you arrive and where you wait. So if we can improve the waiting experience, we can, and the getting off experience will make the bus more attractive. Improving that urban quality in those places. Making crossing the street more simple. A very simple thing, but if we can test more efficient, better ways with better capacity to make crossing the street more simple, we can test that in São Paulo. And also finding ways of making new spaces. Just by taking a little bit more space from the cars and giving a little bit more space to people, we can make more public space. And this is the street today, which it's a lot of traffic, a lot of traffic. Our idea was that we could have dedicated bus lanes and introduce also bike lanes in both directions. So we give an example to test of a biking system. And then we find if that works, that could be applied in other places. And finding a way of making a protected bike lane with safe conditions, including the parked taxis or cars. The pavement is very wide, so we think there's space for both the bikes, parked cars and pavement. And giving some of the infrastructure that other places have, the best practice infrastructure, to give a taste of what good mobility could be like. And we could make this waiting environment, which to me looks like this, into something much more attractive and pleasant. The next one, an area which is one of the most exciting places to visit as a visitor around in the Cinco de Marzo, is this very busy shopping environment. And when you go there, there's so many people, and it's really crazy and busy and wonderful in a way. But how could we make a better walking experience, but also make it possible to have a rest as well? The possibility to rest in these places, and maybe even make an environment which would be better for the commercial activities, to better market situation. So we looked particularly at the 25th of March Street making the walking and selling situation better. But we also had a little extra place we thought we could make a nice place to rest. So a nice combination. And this the idea of a small public space that after the shopping or between the shopping, you can have a rest, have a coffee, something to eat. And just to test that, with on the edge of the car park, maybe some containers, and painting a nice public space, which is very close to the busy shopping area. Today, this is, if you understand the section, it's a lot of traffic in the street, and of course, it's a lot of people walking, so it's a bit chaotic. And the idea was, if we make the more space, so we move the bancas, we move the stalls further out, so there's more space between the buildings and the stalls. So there's more space for walking here, and also taking away the cars during the day, so that there's really much more space for an enjoyable walking and shopping experience. So you'll know this is what it looks like today. With a lot of people, a lot of chaos, and the pavement, the sidewalk very crowded with the stalls. And if we could move the stalls out and make more space for the commercial activity, to make so the existing shopping experience could be much better. Oh, another wonderful place around the Pleasure is, have you ever seen this situation? Hundreds of children visit every day because it's such an important place in the city, and there are always some very desperate teachers, very nervous, keeping the children like sheep in a small group, because it's a very difficult place to bring children. It's very exposed because of the traffic. So how can we make this space perform better for those cultural visitors, and make the children's experience, their memory of coming to downtown São Paulo much nicer? So we're looking at the area here, and it's the collegio, the cultural buildings. There is the Simonson Street as well, which is interesting, the surrounding streets. We also looked at the connection. It would be very nice if there was a connection from here down to the bus station. And I don't know if you can see this, there was an idea maybe of some steps and maybe a big slide which could connect down to the bus station. But making this place by reducing the traffic and making it more friendly, places to stay, places to gather, so that the children's visit could be more enjoyable. And then looking at the side streets and just massaging the car situation, because if you go to Roberto Simonson, because there are many car park accesses, there's a lot of cars going through. And also there's a lot of cars go there because they think they can save time. So they're driving very fast, straight into the cultural quarter, going past the entrance to the museums. And so we thought we must reduce the traffic and maybe make more space. There are some very good restaurants on Roberto Simonson, and maybe make space. So rather than parked cars, there could be spaces for cafe and restaurant, for benches. And if you do some mathematics, one parking space, it could be 10 bicycle spaces, or if you've got a restaurant, 12 spaces for people eating and drinking. And which is better business for São Paulo? One parked car or 12 people eating and drinking? So this idea of changing Roberto Simonson to what it is today, which is a lot of space for cars, into a place, a surface, would be more space for people and commercial activities. And finally, another famous place in the city, outside the university and the law faculty, San Francisco. Another space that's got this very nice floor, but it's such a lot of traffic. Such a lot of traffic. And then could we have a bit more life here in the area, and especially look at the youth aspect. With all of the students coming and going, could there be more things for students to do stay afterwards. It's could we make it easier to cross this nice surface in front of the university? Could that surface continue across to make one big surface? So very easy to cross the street when you walk up the pedestrian street, cross over university. Here there are some very horrible things, some cages from the metro. Could those be taken away to make more public space? So could we have more space, take away the cages? Could we bring in some containers with temporary activities, take away the parked cars on the low level, so there could be some activities, maybe sports, things that students could do. And we go from, now you'll know this place today, so big road surface, the university is isolated from the square. We have these very strange cages, which is very hard to understand what they're there for. And we could make a space which would be very attractive for young people to hang out, places to sit with cafes, a very good connection with the university, more soft mobility, so biking would be easier. But also think about making a space that would be nice at night time as well. I'm thinking about projection and light to make a space, because if the students or these nice young people could hang around more, it could be a more attractive place to spend time at night. And finally, how do we get started on Anhangabaú? And it would be really nice to do something very fast. For the last 10 years in Paris, every year in the summer, they put sand down and they make a beach in the city. And we wondered, maybe a very simple thing to get started, try making a beach for the summer in Anhangabaú. And you know, you could have a stand selling avellanas and coconut water and give people a taste of what public life could be like. Maybe you could have the municipal police wearing sunga. You know, but we have some very surprising public life. And maybe that horrible tunnel underneath the space, maybe we could remember the river by doing something very funny when you drive through the tunnel. So we could remember the river that's underneath. So even that nasty experience could be something nice. So these are the ideas, and this is the story of a process of how we come from with this Danish method. And I am not the author. I'm the messenger. I've been working with a very group of talented professionals and members of the public here in São Paulo, kind of a bit like a coach on this São Paulo team. But it's a project which has been born here and has grown here. And maybe we can imagine,
Tudo bem?
in not so many years,
Não, ainda não. Eu estou saindo do centro agora. Numa palestra que eu vim cobrir e está acabando uma fala, aí eu já vou pro... Tá.